Democratic delay. Why President Joe Biden's major spending proposal will have to wait. Next steps. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill look for ways to salvage their agenda. Border and election protection. A former Homeland Security official describes what's at stake. And health scare. A Supreme Court justice tests positive for COVID-19. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, October 1st, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. Now that a government shutdown has been officially averted, the battle continues on the president's other social spending bills. The first item of business for Congress is voting on the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales runs it all down for us.
Disagreements within the Democratic Party caused House Speaker Nancy Pelosi not to bring the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill to the House floor last night. But tonight, the Speaker says a vote will happen.
We're on a path to have something that I can say to my colleagues with integrity and certainty is the path we're on. And in terms of timing and the rest, I wish we had more time.
Progressives still are unwilling to budge on passing a $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal until they get a guarantee that a much bigger $3.5 trillion social safety net expansion is passed as well.
I don't have an offer in front of me. My number is 3.5. Our number is 3.5. Somebody has a different offer, then they can put it on the table.
I think we feel comfortable that we're being listened to, and I think it is clear to those that are part of our discussions that we are very serious about where we stand on this issue.
Two moderate senators, Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, are holding the key in the Senate. Senator Manchin says he told President Biden he would agree to a $1.5 trillion deal, far below the $3.5 trillion proposed.
I'm willing to sit down and work through that 1.5 to get our priorities, and they can come back and do later, and they can run on the rest of it later. I think there's many ways to get to where they want to.
Catholic Congressman French Hill tells me it's not just the massive amount of money, but the lack of pro-life policies, like the Hyde Amendment, has been stripped from the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill.
Even if you cut back the amount of money in the 3.5 reconciliation bill, it's the policy that's the problem, not the number of dollars. And the progressive left in the House and the Senate want to systematically transform America.
Republicans and Catholic Democratic Senator Joe Manchin say without the Hyde Amendment protections, the reconciliation bill is dead on arrival. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
President Joe Biden traveled to the Capitol Hill this afternoon to rally Democrats around his stalled proposals. He is still seeking a way to push his priorities across the finish line. White House correspondent Owen Jensen continues our team coverage. Owen?
Tracy, that finish line you mentioned tonight looks more like a brick wall. As President Biden's spending proposals now face an uncertain path ahead, he's also facing slumping poll numbers.
President Joe Biden arrives on Capitol Hill, making a personal appearance to greet fellow Democrats face to face. He's trying to pull the caucus together to pass his $3.5 trillion Build Back Better proposal. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says the president is not giving up.
These are his proposals. This is something he passionately believes in, both pieces of legislation. And so it's absolutely right for him to go to where they are and make the case for both.
Part of the $3.5 trillion plan includes creating free preschool for 3- and 4-year-olds. The Heritage Foundation not impressed, writing in an article today, not only is there scant evidence of long-term cognitive improvements among children who participate in preschool programs, but distantly managed, center-based childcare and pre-K programs are not the type of early childhood education and care that most parents want.
Meanwhile, President Biden's poll numbers slipping. In July, 59% of Americans approved of his leadership. In August, that number fell to 54%. And now just half of all Americans approve of his leadership. That's according to an Associated Press NORC poll, a drop of 9 percentage points in just a few months.
And on the COVID front, drug maker Merck says its experimental pill reduced hospitalizations and deaths by half in people recently infected with coronavirus. The U.S. will buy 1.7 million doses of the drug if it is authorized by the FDA.
The news of the efficacy of this particular antiviral is obviously very good news.
Whether the president's trip to Capitol Hill changes any minds, of course, remains to be seen. The White House says the president will hit the road next week pushing his spending proposals. Now, if it all falls apart, it could be devastating politically. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The results of the Arizona 2020 election audit show President Joe Biden won, but the investigation may not be over. Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich has told Maricopa County officials to preserve election records for review and potential litigation. In a statement, the Republican Attorney General said the Arizona Senate's report, quote, raises some serious questions regarding the 2020 election. And joining us now for further analysis is chairman of the Election Transparency Initiative and former acting deputy secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli. Ken, great to see you. Welcome back. First off, I know that you've been following the Arizona audit really closely. I'd like to get your thoughts on Attorney General Brnovich's concerns about the report. Do you think that it raises serious questions?
Well, certainly there's gaps between the law and the performance identified here. And one of the things that rarely happens is an entity like the Attorney General's office, Mark Brnovich's office, actually running them to ground. And that's not because we presume anybody is guilty of anything at this stage, but to fully flesh out, take the audit all the way down to the individuals in a particular category of failure, for instance. For instance, thousands of people voting from a prior address, allegedly. Well, you know, a formal investigator going to those houses and identifying whether that's actually true really puts a lot of meat on the bones of a conclusion like you saw in the audit. So I also think just philosophically, it's important for state legislatures to see themselves as being the entity that's supposed to do these sorts of audits. The Constitution says they pick the electors in the presidential races, and they should be the ones running these audits.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the report concluded that President Joe Biden won the state by a bigger margin than previously that is reported. That said, what more can you tell us about the report and audit? I know the Heritage Foundation's Hans von Spakovsky recently wrote in part, and you sort of mentioned this, the purpose of an audit is really not to overturn an election. Can we talk a little bit more?
Yeah, there's no question. And that, you know, there's a lot of popular hue and cry about, and President Trump fans some of this, of course, that somehow this will reach a different conclusion in Arizona. That's not the point of an audit. I agree with Hans entirely. It's to understand what happened. It is partly to provide information to Attorney General Brnovich in that state, and it's also intended to provide information to the state legislature so they can fix the weak spots. And one of the things we see rather clearly is the need for much cleaner voter rolls, and this is a repeated theme from other states as well, because the lack of connection between voting outcomes by individuals and the voter rolls is turning up in place after place. VoteRef.com, nonprofit, did an analysis using Nevada's own government information and found in 15 of their 17 counties, the government's own information about who voted and how many ballots were cast did not match. That doesn't mean there was cheating per se, but it does mean that in 15 out of 17 counties, they didn't get it right. So surely there's room for improvement there, and that's what things like the Arizona audit are really for, and that's what we at the Election Transparency Initiative work on. We're trying to fix the problems that were so evident in 2020 so they don't happen again, and so that every American, people who vote on the winning side and vote on the losing side, and people who don't vote at all can have confidence in the outcome of the election.
Ken, we have a little less than a minute left, but I quickly want to talk about the border. Panama's foreign minister recently weighed in and said that another caravan of about 60,000 migrants is making its way to the U.S. southern border, and essentially called on the Biden administration to work with other countries to come up with a plan. I'd like to get your take on that. And also, it seems like these groups of migrants continue to grow and are rather organized.
Oh, they're very organized. Surely people watching us didn't think it was a coincidence that thousands upon thousands of Haitians who have lived all over Central and South America for 5 or 6 years suddenly all showed up at Del Rio, Texas at the same time. It is not a coincidence. They communicate. Look closely at the pictures. They have cell phones, smartphones. They're all communicating on social media networks. It's part of how we know caravans are coming. But the numbers, as you point out, are just getting enormous. And this is exactly what we told them would happen during the transition, and they just wouldn't listen. And America's paying a very dear price for that right now.
Well, Ken, thank you as always for weighing in. We always appreciate it. Ken Cuccinelli, Director of the Election Integrity Project and former Acting Deputy Security for the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you again, Ken.
Good to be with you.
Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh has tested positive for COVID-19. The Catholic Supreme Court Justice is fully vaccinated, and he is showing no symptoms. His family tested negative yesterday. The new Supreme Court session begins on Monday. The new heartbeat law in Texas was back in court today. A federal judge is set to consider whether the state can leave the measure in place. The Biden administration has called the law unconstitutional and filed a lawsuit last month. The U.S. Supreme Court has already allowed the law to remain in place. Coming up, coronavirus lockdown. Which country is finally allowing more freedom of movement? And October prayer intention. The Holy Father seeks more disciples of Christ. Sri Lanka is partially lifting its coronavirus national lockdown. The measure was imposed 6 weeks ago. Strict restrictions remain for public transportation and large group gatherings. People are allowed out only for work or for essential shopping. The rate of infection in the country is dropping, though, and there are concerns over the ability of the economy to recover. Well, the government of Switzerland is establishing an embassy at the Vatican. Currently, the country's ambassador to Slovenia is responsible for diplomatic relations with the Holy See. Swiss officials say the arrangement is no longer efficient and reflects the growing number of high-level official visits in recent years. Pope Francis has released his prayer intention for the month of October. A través de su testimonio de vida. The Holy Father's message is an invitation to all of the faithful to be missionary disciples of Christ. Pope Francis also says that we are called to recognize how the Spirit of the Lord can help us address and overcome the challenges facing humanity and the Church. A new book based on an encyclical by Pope Francis says the Church's social teaching is deeply rooted in God's love for humanity. The book is called Fraternity, Sign of the Times, written by Cardinal Michael Czerny and Father Christian Barone. It is based on the Holy Father's Fratelli Tutti. Pope Francis wrote the preface for the new book. And joining us now is one of the authors of that book, Cardinal Michael Czerny, Undersecretary of the Migrants and Refugees section of the Holy See's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Your Eminence, thank you so much for your time today. We're grateful. Can you tell us how the idea of the book came about, and also what was it like working with Pope Francis? I understand he wrote the preface for the book.
Yeah, well, that's your second question is very easy to answer. He knew about the book as it was being conceived and planned, and he encouraged us to write it. So he knew all along, and so when it came time to write the preface, he did so with real knowledge of what we were attempting, and I think he beautifully encourages people to understand and to read and to appreciate what both the history and the contemporary impact of Fratelli Tutti.
Yeah, and I understand the Holy Father says in that preface that the Church's social teaching is not outside theology, but instead deeply rooted in God's love for humanity. Can you talk to us more about that, and what do you think he means by that?
Well, I think we could take the example from Jesus. When we read the Gospels, we don't see Jesus speaking about the kingdom and then saying, now I'm going to stop talking about the kingdom and I'm going to tell the Good Samaritan parable, or I'm going to heal the sick, or I'm going to drive out the demons. No, they are part and parcel of his mission and his ministry, and part and parcel of our bringing the gospel, the good news, to the world and indeed to ourselves is to put it in short terms, the preferential option for the poor. It's a whole, you might say, way of life, way of faith, way of ministry. It's not in pieces, and the social impact is not an afterthought or an optional extra.
And also, could you mind, and do you mind sharing with us how this idea came about, and also what you hope people take away from reading your book?
The idea was born because of Pope Francis's deep involvement in the teaching of Vatican II to such an extent that we understand everything he says and does as implementing the Council, but we had the impression that people weren't necessarily interpreting it that way because he didn't make the connections with the Council explicit very much, and he explains that himself in the preface. So we wrote the first part to show the roots of Pope Francis's social teaching, and indeed of his whole ministry, in the fundamental teachings of the Council, the people of God, and the Church's mission to the world. And then the second part is a reading, an interpretation, a presentation of Fratelli Tutti, which sums up and culminates and in a sense brings to a crescendo the teaching, the social teaching of the Holy Father.
Well, Your Eminence, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate speaking with you. Cardinal Michael Czerny, Undersecretary of the Migrants and Refugees Section of the Holy See's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. Thank you again.
Thank you, and bye-bye from Rome.
Up next, 40 Days for Life. Sidewalk counselors join those praying to end abortion. U.S. Catholic bishops announce October as Respect Life Month, and right now pro-life advocates are joining together outside of abortion clinics around the world. They are taking part in 40 days of prayer to end abortion. Correspondent Mark Irons reports.
So us being out here is especially important because everything we offer is better than having to go inside.
The mission is to pray that women won't walk through these doors to have an abortion.
I'm a mother from a crisis pregnancy.
Catherine Hunter leads this group of sidewalk counselors. Hoping to change hearts and minds, they try to engage with the people going in and out of the Metropolitan Family Planning Clinic, an abortion facility in College Park, Maryland. Years ago, Hunter had 2 abortions. She attributes it to what she calls being on the Russian roulette of birth control.
You know, this is a very violent sort of cycle, to be on birth control, to have an abortion, to be on birth control again, and to have an abortion.
But now she advocates for life, and these prayer warriors are joined by others around the world for a 40-day vigil, praying outside abortion clinics like Planned Parenthood.
Right now, we're in the midst of the largest 40 Days for Life campaign ever.
Sean Carney is the founder of 40 Days for Life, an internationally coordinated effort aiming to end abortion through prayer. This year, he says more than 600 cities are taking part.
We can't sit by. You know, abortion has a sense of urgency that very few other issues have. It goes on today. There are 2,500 abortions every single day in America.
And Carney mentioned the Metropolitan Family Planning Clinic in College Park as being particularly brutal in the number of innocent lives it takes.
These pro-life advocates are praying outside this abortion facility. We just saw one woman walk in, but then she came out.
Bonnie Burrell, a sidewalk counselor, had a chance to speak with her.
I asked her if she had changed her mind, and she said yes.
It's a big victory for this small group.
we believe it is our work as caring, compassionate Christians and Catholics to come out here to offer one last petition of love and mercy.
And Catherine Hunter, now a mother, told us about giving birth and raising her son, Gabriel, after a crisis pregnancy.
It's been very healing to choose life and to have that baby love you out of that situation.
In College Park, Maryland, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
That's incredible. Thank you for that, Mark. And finally tonight, today is the feast day of St. Therese of Lisieux, the young Carmelite nun whose little way to show love for God and neighbor has inspired millions of people. And joining us now to share more about the life and legacy of this doctor of the church is Reverend Joe Horn, Rector of the National Shrine of the Little Flower Basilica in Royal Oak, Michigan. Father Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. Many share a great devotion to St. Therese, including a lot of our viewers, but for those who may not be so familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about her life and why she is called the Little Flower and why she is associated so often with children?
Well, I think that's exactly her story. She, at a very young age, was being called to serve the Lord in great love. I think she said the first word that she ever learned how to spell was heaven. And so at a young age, she was just enamored by this process where we are, leaving this earth one day and populating heaven. And she made a promise that she would do her work, right? That she would begin her work in heaven by bringing other souls to Christ, and that she would shower roses, onto those who would pray with her and pray for the salvation of souls. So I think that's how the Little Flower, began to develop. But her religious name, right, is Therese of the infant of Jesus, the infant Jesus, and also of the Holy Face. So, she's got a multitude of names, but we know her commonly as the Little Flower, especially here at the Shrine of the Little Flower.
Yeah, and as you know, we're living through some pretty turbulent times right now. There's a lot of stress and suffering, unfortunately. How can the Little Way help us and others in our daily lives?
Well, she said that you don't have to serve with great strength. In other words, you don't have to be the biggest, strongest person, but that if you surrender to Jesus, she said even picking up a pin in great love, out of great love for Jesus, could save a soul.
It's such a great message.
Isn't it awesome? Like,
yeah.
You don't have to be the greatest. You can actually be who God has made you to be, weak as we are, and still be very, very useful to God and very, very powerful in his name.
Yeah, that is a powerful message, too. Can you tell us in what ways does the Shrine of the Little Flower Basilica work to spread the message of St. Therese, not just on her feast day, but also throughout the year?
So we're especially blessed as a basilica, a minor basilica, to have 3 schools. And so we wind up being able to teach St. Therese's Little Way to about 1,000 children, just under 1,000 children every year in our school system. That's one very powerful way, yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And anything else that you would like to share with our viewers that maybe we didn't talk about?
Well, as a basilica, I'm learning that we are to reach out. I've been here 18 months, and we're learning that our job, our work as a basilica, is to reach out to not just our parish, but to the region and even to the state and to the nation, to try and bring about a greater understanding of Therese, but also Carmelite spirituality, and also to build up our Catholic body to be evangelizers. So we're putting together a series, a program called Live at the Basilica, to bring speakers in who will encourage us and challenge us to be the best, Catholics we can be.
Well, that is so wonderful. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today about all this. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. God bless you on this feast day.
God bless you as well. Thank you so much, Father. We appreciate it. And we thank you for joining us tonight. For everyone here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.